with, that's not right. I guess with excessive, the autocorrect said Access Hospitality, which is my new favorite spinoff of Access Hollywood. What's good? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid. I am a 29-year-old man reading them now on a quest to determine if this was a book series that we've all been sleeping on as a society. I'm not on this quest alone, though. I am joined by someone that you might recognize from The Bright Sessions or the other fine work at Atypical Artists or the author of a book called Some Faraway Place. It's Lauren Shippen. Lauren, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to talk about this series.
I'm very excited as well. I was very delighted to learn that you were a fan of the series so that I could talk about it with you, because it's always fun talking to you in general, but also about books. And now you've written your own books. Like, look at this. Perfect guest. I'm stoked.
Absolutely wild.
So before we get into chapter 17, which is called We Shop for Waterbeds, I wrote in my notes, why not? Like, at this point, of course.
What else are you going to do?
Shout out to the people who've been sending me that tweet/meme, whatever, of someone saying that the chapter titles of Percy Jackson books remind them of clickbait YouTube titles, except halfway through the chapter, you learn that the clickbait is actually real and it's not a lie.
God, that's exactly it.
A very accurate description.
Rick Riordan was ahead of his time. He truly was.
He truly, truly was. But what is your history with the series? When did you first start reading it? All of that good stuff.
So I came to it fairly late. The first book came out, what, in like 2008?
2005, I believe.
2005. Okay, so wow, way earlier than I thought. I was, I think, the right age to be reading these books when they came out, but I just kind of like missed them somehow. And then sometime in college, my sister, who also reads like a lot of YA, bought them on our shared Kindle account. I was traveling and started reading it on my phone on the train and just like laughing out loud on this train. Like, I just thought it was like so funny. Burned through the first like 2 books, and then a couple months later read the third, and then I haven't read the 4th or 5th. Like, I don't know what happened, but I think I just got like distracted by school and like got busy and just didn't quite make my way back. And by the time I was like, oh wait, there are 2 more books, it had like been too long, and I was like, do I need to reread 1 through 3 before diving back in? So I've only read the first 3, but I remember finding them absolutely delightful and thinking like, I know that this is meant for 13-year-olds, but I'm 20 and I think this stuff is hilarious.
Yeah, I've heard a similar story with a lot of folks who are guests on the show, where because of the time the 4th and 5th came out, we were either high school, college, whatever it was, and life just got in the way. So you are not alone, but I'm glad that we get to talk about this book because, yes, it's very good no matter the age. I'm 29 and I laugh out loud many times, and I'm very intrigued by the story, and I'm very invested in the story, and I'm very nervous for all the characters, especially in these chapters as things are starting to ramp up and get scary.
Yeah.
So I say we get right into it. Where we last left our heroes, they had just come out of the Lotus Casino, and they were in there for 5 days, and now they only have 1 day left. Terrifying.
I've been to Vegas exactly once in a casino, and that's exactly what it feels like. It's horrible.
Yeah, I've never been to Vegas at all. I don't think I would want to go to a casino at all. I've been to 1 casino in my life, and all I did was sit by a slot machine and put in quarters and get 5 free gin and tonics, and I thought, I have won.
That's a good deal.
Yeah, I thought, I have won the casino.
Yeah, you did it.
Paid $5, lost all the money, but I got 5 free drinks. I'll take it.
Yeah, that's a gin and tonic for $1. It's pretty good.
Pretty good deal, especially in this economy.
I went to Vegas and did not gamble at all.
Nice. Yeah. Also a way to do it. Just see shows and don't gamble.
Yeah, exactly.
So the chapter begins with narrator Percy just saying, it was Annabeth's idea. And my first thought was getting waterbeds? And then, oh, never mind, something else. They hop into a cab. They tell the cab driver they want to go to LA. And the cabbie says that you have to pay up front. A common theme of adults here. The diner made them pay up front, which is smart. The cab driver also, especially because I know that Vegas and LA are kind of close. I have no idea how far of a drive it's supposed to be. It feels like at least 3 hours, right?
It's usually like a 4.5 hour drive. But I think if you paid for it, like a cab driver probably would take you.
Yeah. I mean, get good money for it, sure.
Yeah.
So the cabbie says they have to pay up front. Annabeth asks if he would accept a casino card. Apparently, this is a thing that sometimes happens. I have no idea if this happens in the real world. Feels like it shouldn't.
I have no idea either. I do know that it's not that easy to get a cab in Vegas.
Okay.
So unrealistic recruiting.
So he says, sure, but you have to swipe it to show the value. So she hands over the Lotus Cash card, and when he swipes it, it just shows an infinity sign, which what kind of cab thing has that built in? Because usually it's just going to be your classic 8888 clock thing.
Yeah.
But to have an infinity somehow, I wonder if you can draw that with the 8888 or whatever clock.
I don't think
But it felt very funny.
Because it's curved. Like, that would be...
Exactly. It would be a really gross looking infinity sign. These are the things I think about when reading this book, you know.
Very important.
Evil casino, super believable. Cab has a thing that can say infinity sign?
I don't think
know. Not so fast, Rick. So he is very excited about the prospect of this. He says he will take them to Los Angeles, and he calls Annabeth Your Highness, which I thought was very funny.
Yes, perfect.
So Annabeth says to go to the Santa Monica Pier as their destination, which is nice because water messenger mom quotation marks person told them to do that. Annabeth says the cabbie can keep the change if he gets them there quickly. And narrator Percy says that the speedometer never dropped below 95. It said through the Mojave Desert. So I don't know if he just went 95 while they were through the desert or if the entire drive he was going 95. But what in tarnation? That's wild.
Just like zooming down Santa Monica Boulevard, 95 miles an hour.
There's got to be red lights / speed traps at some point in this very long drive, right?
But I mean, hey, if it is 3 a.m, like, it would be clear. LA's dead at 3 a.m.
I guess so. So Percy relays the details of his most recent dream to the team. He's a bit fuzzy on some of the details because Lotus Casino's kind of messing with his brain. Percy can't quite pick up on whose voice it was. Remember, there's the deep voice and then there's the servant. I don't really know who the deep voice person is. I don't think it's Hades. And I'm thinking that the servant is Luke because Water Messenger told us not to trust the gifts. Obviously, we trust Riptide. The only other gift is the shoes, so I don't trust the shoes. Thus, I also don't trust Luke by extension. And I didn't really have an idea of who Deep Voice was before getting into it. I thought it could be Ares. That was my initial guess right off the jump. But then we met Ares, so I don't know if he's actually the big villain or if he's just kind of like the side quest villain. But based on what happens next, I have a new theory. So Percy can't remember the name that the servant called the deep voice, and Annabeth guesses the rich one and the silent one, which are both nicknames for Hades because she is convinced it's Hades. But Percy says neither of them sound right. I scrolled back up in my very legal PDF of the book, and I saw that it is the crooked one, and that feels like it could be Hades, but I was also wondering, could this be Hermes? Because they had talked about what the people in the Hermes cabin looked like. And they all said they had kind of crooked smiles. So maybe that's how he's the crooked one. I was thinking, you know, if there's some reason of why Luke would be evil, maybe if Hermes is evil, Luke is doing all of this to try to impress his dad. But I cannot think of a legitimate reason, or I have no idea of a Greek god reason of why Hermes would hate Poseidon or Zeus or both, or would want bloodshed. It feels very uncharacteristic of Hermes, but this is just like my thought because I feel very good about Luke as servant. I don't know about Deep Voice. So this is where my head is at the time of reading.
Okay. I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's all very fun. Like, hair guest, just nod and say, you cannot do anything else. So Grover says that the throne room that Percy described kind of sounds like Hades' throne room. But Percy feels like something is up because 1, the throne room wasn't really a primary feature of the dream. And 2, the voice didn't feel like a god's voice, which is very interesting. Now I was only thinking of gods as potential villains. If it's not a god who's behind all of this, I don't know who it could be. I'm just so perplexed by all of this. I just don't know the rules. I don't know. I don't understand where the voice is coming from. Who can live in the chasm? Does it even make sense for Luke to be taught? I don't know what's going on. I really hope it's not Chiron is where all I'm at. I just hope it's not Chiron and Luke together. I like Chiron too much. I would be heartbroken if it was Chiron and Luke together working in cahoots. I would hate that so much. So Annabeth's eyes widen, which is suspicious. But then she kind of does an oh, nothing thing when Percy presses her on it. And she just reiterates, it has to be Hades. And perhaps this voice, even if it's someone else, They're being sent by Hades to get the bolt. Annabeth kind of picks up what I'm putting down, though, which is that Hades doesn't have the bolt. This is where I'm at. This is where she's at. And she believes that the servant was sent to get the bolt, maybe even to steal the bolt, but he fumbled the bag and somehow lost the bolt, if he even got it in the first place. And that could explain the Furies being sent out for it. Hades doesn't have it. Furies have asked, where is it? So they're trying to get the bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Percy notes that Annabeth looks a little bit pale, but he can't determine what's wrong. I don't like this. Annabeth clearly knows something, but Percy doesn't press her exactly on this, but he does ask if Hades and the people that he is sending out for the bolt think that Percy has it, why would Percy be going to the underworld? That wouldn't make any sense, because then he would just be delivering it right to Hades. Grover posits maybe they think that you are trying to threaten / bribe / blackmail Hades into getting your mom back, which is a good theory all around.
Yeah, be a good deal.
Right. I could totally see that being the reasoning of why they're after him. Percy then brings up that Deep Voice said that they are waiting for 2 items. And Percy thinks, well, the bolt is one, but what the heck is the other item? And Grover isn't sure. Annabeth looks worried again, not liking this. I was skin-crawlingly uncomfortable here because Annabeth is so smart. She knows something. And I get that for the purposes of a story, for plot twist stuff, you can't necessarily lay it all out here. But this is the kind of thing where I just want to shake Percy and say, I know it's uncomfortable. Just ask her. I know you're trying to be nice.
But it also makes so much sense for their characters too, right? For like Annabeth to be like, I can't say anything until I'm like 100% certain that this is the thing. And then for Percy to be like, I'm too scared of Annabeth to ask her outright.
Right. It's a combo of that. And then also Percy is so nice when people are uncomfortable about stuff. He doesn't push people on things that they clearly don't want to talk about, even when he has a very keen interest in knowing what they are hiding.
Yeah.
He's like too nice to a fault here. I get it. And I think it makes sense for their characters, like you're saying, but also, come on, man, just ask her. Grover's unsure. Annabeth looks worried. So Percy asks, you have an idea what might be in that pit, don't you? I mean, if it isn't Hades. And Annabeth says, Percy, let's not talk about it, because if it isn't Hades, no, it has to be Hades. And they drop this, but I didn't want them to drop this. It's too important.
What is she thinking?
Exactly. So they're entering California, and Percy feels less confident in it being Hades, which I am on board for, because I don't think it's Hades. It'd be too easy. He feels like he's missing one key detail, and he likens it to struggling to read a common word because 1 or 2 letters are flowing around. So again, making his dyslexia relatable, I think is cool, and based on what everyone has told me for the feedback, things like this are accurate when he just kind of describes the symptoms or how it affects how he thinks. That has all been very good representation. I know people have different opinions about the superpowerness of it all and calling his godlike stuff ADHD and dyslexia. I feel like some people are okay with it, others aren't, from the vibe that I've gotten from listeners. But seems like everyone enjoys at least these types of descriptions. And this feels like something super relatable and believable. And like you said earlier, I think it's nice for Rick to work those in naturally. It never feels forced, but it's a nice way to remember, these are things that Percy is going through.
Yeah. And he does it in a way too that even if you don't have dyslexia, like you understand what Percy is describing, right? Like you can understand this feeling of like, oh, that there's something there that I'm seeing, but I'm not seeing it fully. And it's like a tip of the tongue sensation.
Exactly, for sure. Percy's worried because with the deadline, and then I wrote in my notes, oh my God, I forgot about the deadline already.
Which is one day away because we were in the casino for 5 days.
With the deadline, if Hades doesn't have the bolt, they won't have time to figure out where it actually is or who actually has it. So they basically are going to the underworld, hoping it's there. And if it's not, they might just run out of time, which is terrifying. So they arrive at Santa Monica. Percy marvels at how much ocean there is on Earth, and thus how powerful Poseidon must be. And then he starts to go into the water, and Annabeth warns that the water is mad polluted. And I thought, really? And then I Googled it, and the internet was like, yeah, dude, Santa Monica Beach is mad nasty. There was something where it was the top 10 worst beach along the entire California coast. Used to live in Los Angeles. Is this accurate? Have you been there? Is the water gross as hell? Do people not swim in it? Or did they say, screw it, whatever?
I mean, people swim in it. I think that like everything south of the Santa Monica Pier when it comes to beaches, like Santa Monica Beach and Venice Beach are like beaches where people like will hang out, work out. It's a very touristy beach. And so, yeah, they're not as clean. But if you go like, a 10-minute drive north of the pier, you get Will Rogers State Beach, which is a lovely beach that is pretty clean and good for swimming. And also, like, it's the ocean. Like, it moves around a lot. It's not like a lake, Like, yeah, it's not the nicest beach in the world, but it's like, it's the Pacific Ocean. Like, the water's going to be different in an hour.
Totally. I also was wondering how close to the pier they were, because the pier is so iconic. And I wonder if people are on the pier and they just see a kid walk into the water very calmly. And that's what Percy does.
It's the middle of the night, right? Like they're...
That's true. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So hopefully not.
So Percy walks into the water. He is fully submerged. He can breathe underwater. He can tell where everything is. And he can even see the currents, which I thought is cool.
The dream.
His water powers seem very strong.
They're very cool too.
Yeah, I really enjoy learning more about his powers. I hope we get more and more of that. So he then gets nuzzled by a 5-foot-long mako shark, which I don't know on the level of shark spectrum from great white to, I don't even know what's the shark version of a garter snake. Like, I don't know how scary a mako shark is.
I feel like a nurse shark would be probably like the most docile shark, but mako sharks I think are also like similarly, like when people go swimming with sharks, I think those are the sharks that they're swimming with.
Okay, got it. Not terrifying shark. Cool.
Yes.
But the shark kind of nuzzles in a way where it signifies to him, grab on. So he grabs the fin, and then the shark makes another motion to grab tighter. So he does, and then he rides the shark deep into the water, and he gets dropped off at a huge chasm. And initially I was like, chasm, no! And then I remembered, oh wait, this is just how the ocean works. I was thinking like Finding Nemo, the drop-off! So something is then rising out of the chasm. It is the voice of a woman similar to Sally's. It calls out Percy's name, and then he sees that she has black hair and a green silk dress. She is riding a huge seahorse, which is a flex. That is fantastic.
So cool.
She dismounts this giant seahorse, and the seahorse and the shark then start playing tag with each other, which
cute.
I know people have complained about the movies leaving a lot of stuff out of the books. If this is one of the things that is not in the movies, I will break my DVD in half. I've already said something else would make me break the DVD in half, so maybe I'll break it into quarters now. But come on, man. This is adorable. You better include this.
It's so cute.
Adorable. So Percy recognizes her as the same woman from the Mississippi River. She confirms, and she reveals that she is Nereid, Nereid. I could be butchering this. I'll learn more about her in the episode with Dr. Moy McTeer, where she explains all the Greek stuff to me in between books. But she is a spirit of the sea. And she says the naiads are her cousins. And I thought, that makes sense. Your name is very close to naiad. So the naiads honor Lord Poseidon, but they do not serve in his court. And then Percy goes, and you serve in Poseidon's court? Which I love when he asks these questions where someone says something kind of riddle-esque sounding, and then he waits a beat and goes, so the most obvious question?
Just to clarify.
So she nods and she says that it has been many years since Poseidon had a child, and they've watched Percy with great interest. And this sparks a memory of Percy where he remembers one time he was at the beach, at Montauk Beach, and he saw shapes in the water that looked like faces. So that would explain that.
There you go.
So Percy then says, if my father's so interested in me, why isn't he here? Why doesn't he speak to me? Love a good sassy Percy, which I think some people call Persassy, which I think is very, very funny.
Persassy's very good. I love that.
It's really, really good. So then it says a cold current rose out of the depths. And this is where I wondered if these gods are so in tune to people throwing the slightest of digs at them that they can reply via weather to any sort of slight. Can they not take the time to say hello?
I know. Oh my God. Poseidon, such an absentee father.
Yeah. It's like, too busy to talk to Percy, but if you say something mean, the water's gonna change temperature. Like, just come down and say hi, Dad.
Seriously, you coward.
Now, of course, as is a very common theme in these books, I type something in all caps into my notes, and then the book clarifies it with the next line. Nereid says, Poseidon has a lot on his plate right now with the whole, impending war thing. But also, it is apparently forbidden for him to help Percy directly, as the gods cannot show favoritism. feels like a very clever workaround, but whatever.
Yeah, feels like somebody has an excuse not to parent. That's what it sounds like to me.
This is something I wanted to ask you as a writer. Did you struggle with this where you have to sometimes write things that maybe don't make as much sense in service of making the plot and the pacing of it more compelling, where you go, yeah, it would make more sense for this to happen, but we have to say that monsters can smell cell phones in the Percy Jackson world?
Yeah, 100%. Like there's always something. And sometimes it's because you get like way too far into a thing and you're like, there's this question now that has appeared that I would have to rewrite the entire thing to answer. And so we're just going to make up this rule. And that's what's great about, I think, fantasy and sci-fi especially, is that like you can just make up the rules and it does not matter.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I'm trying to have more grace with it and understand that, sure, some things might not make a little bit more sense, but what's more important? A captivating story, as opposed to, I don't know, this being a 10-page book where it goes, Percy called someone on the phone and they said, oh, actually, I don't have the bolt.
Exactly. And I think also it like, Rick Riordan makes it make sense by the way that he creates characters, right? Like, I think this is the best way to like have a decision that feels not well thought out or like the wrong decision. If you make it part of the character, then it makes sense. And I think with the gods, they are so capricious and particular and have all of these archaic rules that they're following for no reason. So like it does kind of make sense, especially given the whole thing around like Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades not supposed to be having kids. And so it makes sense that they wouldn't be allowed to contact them in a situation like this. And even if it feels like a simple explanation in like the grander scheme of like how these people behave or these gods behave, it's like, okay, yeah, this actually does kind of track with who they are.
Yeah. It's fine, I get it. But Percy thankfully asks what I was wondering. He's also very good at doing this. He goes, even their own kids? And Nereid says, especially their own kids. So, okay, sure. Gods apparently can work by indirect influence only. Because of this, she comes bearing a warning, not good, and a gift. Hooray!
More gifts.
So she holds out white pearls and says, I know your journey to Hades' realm. Few mortals have ever done this and survived. Orpheus, who had great musical skill, but also couldn't follow simple rules.
I was going to say, did Orpheus succeed, really?
No, he did not. You had one rule. Hercules, who had great strength, and Houdini, love this.
I know.
Houdini, who was referenced very briefly earlier, his second mention in this book, Houdini, who could escape even the depths of Tartarus. Do you have these talents? And Percy says, no, ma'am. But I said, where the hell is the Houdini prequel book?
I know.
I need it.
Want the whole story.
Houdini escaping Tartarus? Can you imagine? I don't know. Some evil person puts him in evil handcuffs and he goes, just slips out of them. Be amazing.
It's such a good little piece of world building.
Yes. And I have heard, no one has told me specific ones, but I've heard that this kind of thing gets sprinkled out throughout the series. Like in later books, it'll be, oh, so-and-so is actually a demigod. I'm very excited for all those references. I want more of them. You could not give me enough.
Yeah.
Like one per chapter, I'd be very happy to learn anything. Usain Bolt is the son of Hermes, whatever. It'd be
that would make sense.
He's so fast.
Hello and welcome to this episode's lightning brief. First, from a logistical standpoint, just wanted to give you all the heads up that there will not be an episode of the newest Olympian on Monday, January 3rd, 2022. January is another 5-Monday month, and I figured it made the most sense to take the first Monday off because then I can relax with my family around the holidays, and that would be really nice. I would love to spend as much time with my adorable niece as possible, so hopefully you'll all understand there. I am planning on posting an episode to the Potterless feed that day, though. I think it's a nice little system that we've got going. It worked out well last time where if I'm taking a break for the newest Olympian, I can post an old live show episode of Potterless, and that way you're never going a Monday without nerdy Mike Schubert book content. It's just potentially going to be Potterless from time to time. And if you want to be up to date on the schedule, you want to know what days episodes are coming out and what chapters they cover, you can go to thenewestolympian.com/about. I always keep that up to date. Or you can follow us on social media on Twitter and Instagram, usually towards the beginning of the month. I will post a screen cap of that website page so you understand what the episodes are going to look like for the upcoming month. And speaking of posting that, on Instagram, you may have noticed that I have put forth a bit of a challenge of the listeners. So when I post those, because I live in America, I usually do it in the format where I go month and then day and then year. But I understand that most countries go day, month, year. Now, I put forth the challenge that if the percentage of listenership in countries that use day, month, year exceeds the percentage of listeners from countries that use month, day, year, like America does, I will switch the date format when I post these. Now, it's not just America that goes month, day, year. The countries that use this format include the United States, Canada, the Philippines, and Micronesia. And at the time of recording on December 9th, 2021, the percentage of listenership from those countries is 59.19%. If this number ever goes below 50%, I will give in to the format that is foreign to me, but objectively does make way more sense. I will start using that, but if the countries that use my format ever go above, I'll go back. So whoever is in the lead here gets the easier to comprehend immediately date format to them. So how does this competition work? Tell your friends to listen to the podcast. If you want to see the date format in the style that you prefer, tell friends from your area, hey, there's this great podcast. You should check it out. And we can have a fun little competition going on. So let's see how it goes. But for now, the US and its friends are winning. And on the note of telling your friends about the show, I really do appreciate everyone who has done that, whether you've done it on social media or you've reached out to someone directly. It's so important for growing a podcast, and it's been great to see how many people have talked about the show. And similarly, when people were posting their Spotify Wrapped posts, that was very cool to see how many people had the newest Olympian, a podcast that didn't launch until September of 2021, show up in their top 5 most listened to podcasts of 2021. It's really cool, and I really appreciate it. So that was very sweet to see. It warmed my heart, and I really appreciate everyone who has listened to the show and has told other people to listen to the show, or just screamed about it on social media, hoping that other people join along. Because if we grow this book club, it's only going to make it that much more fun. So I'm so appreciative to everyone who is doing their best to increase the listenership of the show. That's so great, and I cannot thank you all enough. And speaking of people that I cannot thank enough, I want to thank the folks who are supporting the show on Patreon, and specifically, I'd like to give a shout out to the newest members of our team. If you go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon, you can get access to a load of bonus content as a thank you for supporting the show and making it feasible and more simple for me to be a full-time podcaster. It's interesting sometimes being a podcaster. My income situation is not very easy. Ask my tax accountant. So I appreciate the normalcy and stability that Patreon gives me, and that can only happen with all of your support. So thank you so much. So shout out to our newest God tier patrons, Michaela Mythomagic, Liz May, Stephen Hauser, and They've Escaped. I don't know who they are, but now I'm terrified. And shout out to our newest demigod tier patrons, Adam B, Afra Blunt, Roz Goff, and Half-Blood Demi Prince. Also, a name correction for our patron, Stera. And speaking of support, I want to thank Multitude for having us as a part of the collective and supporting the show. There's a bunch of wonderful Multitude podcasts out there, one of which is Exolore, which is hosted by our very own Dr. Moya McTeer. If you've ever wondered what life would be like on a planet different from our own, or how writers create your favorite fictional worlds, Exolore is the podcast for you. Every other week, Dr. Moya McTeer, your favorite astrophysicist/folklorist, explores fictional worlds by building them with a panel of expert guests, interviewing professional world builders, or reviewing the merits of worlds that have already been built. You'll learn, you'll laugh, and you'll gain an appreciation for how special our little planet is. You can subscribe today by searching Exolore, EXOLORE, in your podcast app, or by going to exolorepod.com. And finally, before we go, you're going to hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to be a full-time podcast boy. Some of these ads will be read by me, others won't. The ones that aren't are inserted locally, so if you live in Micronesia, don't be surprised if you hear a Micronesian ad. And once these ads are over, we will get back to this episode of The Newest Olympian.
So Nereid continues, but you have something else, Percy. You have gifts you have only begun to know. The oracles have foretold a great and terrible future for you should you survive to manhood. What an awful sentence.
Terrible thing to say to a child.
Not even a good thing. If you survive to manhood, you will have a great and terrible life. Thanks, Nereid. Poseidon would not have you die before your time, therefore take these. And when you are in need, smash a pearl at your feet. I appreciate that the gift is just a use in case of emergency, like a smoke bomb that a magician uses to make a dramatic exit. Boosh. It's a great visual.
So I have a question for you. When it came to the, do not trust the gifts thing, when you got to this where you're like, oh, could this be the gifts? Because that's what occurred to me on the second reading of it. I was like, wait a second, because I actually don't remember exactly what the gift warning was about.
So I took it to be the shoes, because the gifts he had received at that point was sword and shoes. Mm-hmm. I love Riptide with all of my heart. Beautiful sword boy Riptide. No way can it be evil. The reason I trusted these gifts is because this is the person who said, don't trust the gifts. So if she said, don't trust the gifts, and then came back and gave you untrustworthy gifts.
Bad gifts. Yeah.
That would speak very poorly to Nereid.
Yes.
Or however you pronounce her name. I think I've hit every possible pronunciation at this point. So Percy asks, which I also wanted to ask, what will happen when I smash the pearls? And Nereid says, it depends on the need. Love a good catch-all safety thing? Sure. Yep. But she continues, quote, but remember, what belongs to the sea will always return to the sea. And I wrote in my notes, I'm sorry, what? What does that mean? And Percy says, okay, cool, thanks for the gift. What about the warning? And she says, quote, go with what your heart tells you or you will lose all. Hades feeds on doubt and hopelessness. He will trick you if he can, make you mistrust your own judgment. Once you are in his realm, he will never willingly let you leave. Keep faith. Good luck, Percy Jackson. I don't really know if that's a warning or just a vibe.
All of your uncles are weird, but Hades is the weirdest uncle you have.
I feel like Percy already knew this. She's just really is like, you gotta believe in yourself, Percy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gathered that. Thanks.
I got nothing else going for me.
Yeah. So she summons her seahorse and is about to leave, but Percy calls out and asks, oh, wait, what about those gifts not to trust? I love that Percy does this. Yeah. He's so good about this.
Yeah.
He's so good about asking the question. And I think this is even more of a hat tip to Rick because you can't get mad at Percy. Harry did this all the time in Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. Harry would just not ask the most obvious questions.
Yes.
Percy does, but then the gods do some smug BS where they just don't answer it. And that's what happens here. He asks about it, and then she just leaves. And she says, goodbye, listen to your heart, answer my question.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm going through a tunnel.
Exactly.
So I wrote in my notes, because all she says is goodbye and listen to your heart. I wrote, gee, thanks, Roxette from the song Listen to Your Heart from 1988. Listen to your heart.
That is an extremely specific reference.
Yeah, so specific that when I was first reading this, I was like, who's Roxette? Oh, right,
what?
The artist that was that joke you made a couple weeks ago when you read this. So Percy returns to the team, shows them the pearls, and it leads to this glorious exchange. Annabeth grimaces, and she says, no gift comes without a price. And Percy goes, they were free. And Annabeth shakes her head and says, no, there is no such thing as a free lunch. That's an ancient Greek saying that translated pretty well into American. There will be a price, you wait. Love that. That's so fun.
So good. She's so good. I love her so much.
And then Percy, as the narrator, says, on that happy thought, we turned our backs to the sea. So they scrounge up some change from Ares' backpack, and they take the bus to West Hollywood. How's the bus game in Los Angeles?
Yeah, it's okay. It's pretty, I would say it's like fairly comprehensive. It just takes a long time, right? Because it's like LA traffic is a nightmare to begin with. And then, you know, you add in stops to it, and it's kind of a mess. But
valid.
Yeah. I mean, it's the only public transport that really exists, especially from Santa Monica to West Hollywood. That and cabs are your only option, really.
Come on, LA version of train, you can do it. So the driver says that he recognizes Percy and says, what are you, a child actor? And Percy says, I'm a stunt double for child actors, which is an incredible lie.
Such a good lie.
That is one of the best lies I've ever heard. That is so believable.
Because you cannot really verify it.
Exactly.
They're being like, wait, you don't really look like Macaulay Culkin. You know, it's like, I look enough like him.
Exactly. It's so smart. So they take the bus, they get off the bus. They wander for miles looking for DOA records. No one has ever heard of it. And Percy is trying to find it. He sees on a TV in a store on a display that Smelly Gabe is being interviewed by Barbara Walters. I like that she canonically exists in the PGA universe.
Not a demigod as far as we know.
We'll see. So she's interviewing him while he's in the middle of a poker game. Gross. Hate Smelly Gabe. Ugh. Smelly Gabe says that his grief counselor, Sugar, a young blonde, is the only thing keeping him together. Quote, my stepson took everything I cared about. My wife, my Camaro. I'm sorry, I have trouble talking about it. Frankly, I was surprised he didn't say the car first.
Yeah, I honestly
floored.
was surprised he remembered his wife.
Walters then shows a pic of the whole team. It's the diner photo. And she says, who are the other children in this photo? And the narrator says that Barbara Walters asked this dramatically, which I think is very funny.
Who are the other children in this photo?
Yeah. Who is the man with them? Is Percy Jackson a delinquent, a terrorist, or perhaps the brainwashed victim of a frightening new cult? When we come back, we chat with a leading child psychologist. Stay tuned, America. I have not watched enough Barbara Walters to know if this is her vibe, but is she like this much of a, I don't know, clickbaity is the only word I can think of type person?
Not to my knowledge. I also have not watched a lot of Barbara Walters, but like it felt a lot more like Nancy Grace-ish to me. You know,
also
like
don't know her.
Nancy Grace was the cable news lady. I think it was cable news who would like missing kids were like her thing. Like she would just sort of like fear monger about, if I'm thinking of the right person, like, yeah, very fear mongering and sort of like wild eyed.
Yeah, this felt more like something you would hear on a skewed news station as opposed to, I don't know if she did 60 Minutes or 2020 or whatever Barbara Walters was on, but it feels like those shows, they try to take no sort of bias. This one seems like they're trying to take the bias of being anti-Percy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would love to ask Barbara Walters about this. One, do you know you're in this book? And two, how do you feel about your depiction?
How do you feel about it? Well, and these types of things, like whenever sort of Percy like sees his photo or like, you know, realizes that he's a fugitive or there's news coverage or whatever, always kind of makes me wonder, and it's possible that like this is later confirmed or denied and I'm forgetting, like if any of the gods are somehow like manipulating the news, like if there's some sort of like supernatural interference that's occurring. Because I always sort of like get the feeling that like, yeah, everybody's acting a little bit more dramatically about this thing than they would, you know, without someone pulling the strings.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that could explain the strong anti-Percy sentiment for something that they just turned so quickly from this kid is also missing to this kid did it.
Yeah.
Which is wild. But that's Smelly Gabe for you.
Yeah. Ugh, the worst.
So Grover tells Percy to come on. Their narrator says that this was done, quote, before I could punch a hole in the appliance store window. Fantastic. And very New York of Percy, he notes that Los Angeles sucks because everything is super spread out, which is accurate. And I love that he's doing this.
Yep.
He says, quote, it wasn't enough for LA to be big. It had to prove it was big by being loud and strange and difficult to navigate too. Such a vibe.
Very true.
I'm not a huge Los Angeles fan. I don't know if you have ill will towards it now that you live in a city that I do love with all of my heart, Seattle. But yeah, LA's way too spread out.
I love LA now, but like you have to, it takes 2 years of living there to actually like appreciate it because you start to learn its nooks and crannies. And like, it's not one of my favorite cities in the world by any means, but like I love a lot of things about it. I lived in West Hollywood the entire time that I was there. And like West Hollywood actually is ironically one of the more walkable cities in Los Angeles. And it's still that much spread out that like Percy complaining about it as somebody who like grew up in New York felt right. That's the scale of walkability we're talking about in LA.
Right. And then on the flip side, New York is incredibly walkable, so much so where our standards of walking are wildly high.
Yes.
Anything under an hour, I don't mind.
Yeah.
I live a good 40 to 45 minute walk south of Central Park. But when I have friends visiting New York, I just tell them to meet me in Central Park and then we just walk around.
Yeah.
It's great. But yeah, I have no problem popping on a podcast. I don't know, maybe one made by Mike Schubert and then just, you know, listening to an episode and walking to Central Park. It's fantastic. I'm very down. But I did see a meme recently that someone sent me. It was a Twitter screenshot where it'll say, New Yorkers will say, oh, it's a quick walk. And then it'll be 45 minutes.
Well, and it's the exact same thing with LA and driving, right? Of like, oh, I'm going to, you know, go over and have drinks with my friends. And it's a 45-minute drive. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's not too bad.
Yeah, I get that with Texas because I learned to drive in Texas. I lived there for 10 years. I did high school and college and a little bit more there. And Houston, where I lived, is so spread out that anything under an hour is totally manageable.
Yeah.
And I remember once when I started working at the engineering firm, I had a house party, and I remember someone didn't want to come because I was a 35-minute drive away, and they said it was kind of far. And I said, it's 35 minutes. Come on.
What are you talking about?
Queue up 7 songs on your iPod Touch or whatever and come through.
That's a great way to think about it. It's 7 songs away. That's not long.
That's not bad. Just listen to All Too Well, Taylor's version 3.5 times.
Exactly.
You're fine. You'll come into the energy wanting to punch
and
Jake
then wipe
Gyllenhaal
the
in the
tears
face.
from your eyes and go to the party.
You'll come with a scarf and you won't forget it. Yeah. So at one point, the team gets surrounded by a gang of 6 kids, and Percy immediately uncaps Riptide. They have one day, so I get it, but he's just wasting no time. Uncaps Riptide, swings it. It passes through the leader completely, so a mortal, and the kids are shocked, so the team uses this as an opportunity to flee. They turn down a corner, and the only open store in the entire block is called Krusty's Waterbed Palace. 1, I thought, okay, chapter title, makes sense. But 2, this feels way too similar to Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium for this to be anything good, so I am screaming at my book, no,
don't go in there.
Don't do this. They run in, they hide, and then Grover says, I think we lost him. And then some other voice says, lost who? And they all jump. Fantastic. Narrator Percy says the following, quote, standing behind us was a guy who looked like a raptor in a leisure suit. He was at least 7 feet tall with absolutely no hair. He had gray, leathery skin, thick-lidded eyes, and a cold, reptilian smile. He moved toward us slowly, but I got the feeling he could move fast if he needed to. Scared of this dude, for sure.
Yeah, very, very creepy vibes.
But his fashion game, pretty strong.
Yeah.
His shirt is a silk paisley shirt. It is unbuttoned halfway down his hairless chest. The lapels on his velvet jacket. Mwah.
Paisley and velvet, what a combo.
What a combo. Velvet jacket were as wide as landing strips, according to the narrator. The silver chains around his neck, I couldn't even count them. And I know that we're recording this on November 17th and will be released months later, but for anyone needing a Halloween costume for 2022 and beyond, going as this dude, strong.
Honestly, I have a velvet jacket. I should do this next year.
Let's go. God, that would be good. He introduces himself as Krusty. He knows they were running away from the kids. Apparently, this is a common occurrence. Kind of forces them into looking at waterbeds while they're here. So this feels like not sound business practices. Also, based on what we learn later about Krusty, spoiler alert, he's evil. I was honestly surprised that the kids were legit kids and not some sort of evil, godlike distraction to force people down the alleyway and into the store. I was very surprised that he's just very fortunately located near this gang of ruffians. I guess the tigers from Encyclopedia Brown.
I mean, you know, he could be paying the kids and have them just be like mortal kids, right? Like it could still be a racket.
That's good. That's good. That's good. I like it. Okay, this is now headcanon for sure. So the whole store just has a big 70s energy. One waterbed model has black satin sheets. I hate this. It also has built-in lava lamps in the headboard. I can get behind this.
Very good.
But then there's a vibration feature called the Million Hand Massage, which I cannot support at all.
Extremely creepy. Everything.
So bad.
That's one of those things that it's like if you went over to somebody's house and that was their bedroom situation, you would have to instantly leave.
Right. Especially if this was a romantic situation where you're
get out of there.
Sleeping in someone's bed or doing something else and you see that it has a million hand massage. Hi, I need to leave now.
Immediately.
Also, just the thought of a crusty waterbed. I know his name is Krusty, but still, crusty water can't get crusty.
It's so gross. It's the perfect name.
It's so gross. Now he snaps his fingers and says, ergo, and ropes now hold Annabeth to one bed and Grover to another. I was not surprised at all when this happened.
But still escalates very quickly.
That's what was more surprising.
Yeah.
I was not surprised that this happened. I was not surprised that this guy was evil. I was not surprised that some sort of nefarious thing was built into the waterbeds. I was surprised because ergo is Latin for therefore.
Yeah.
So I don't know why his command is therefore. And you don't have to have taken Latin in high school like I have to know that ergo means therefore because it's enough in society.
Yeah.
But I was very surprised that he said therefore. But I was surprised at how quickly this went from, oh yeah, Krusty seems kind of suspicious. Oh, Krusty's incredibly suspicious.
Yeah, we were tied down.
Because Auntie we got a full chapter out of it. I guess the one not surprising thing is this was at the end of the chapter. I know that every chapter is about 20-ish pages, and I could feel like we were getting there. But yeah, it was 0 to 100 real quick, to quote the great Greek prophet Drake. It was very fast to go from, Krusty seems a little suspicious, and now we're tied to waterbeds. So Krusty then snaps his fingers again and says, ergo, and now the ropes are stretching them out because the beds are 6 feet long and the kids aren't exactly 6 feet tall. So this is terrifying. Percy asks, your name's not really Krusty, is it? And he says, legally, it's Procrustes. I don't know this Greek character. Do you?
No, I didn't either.
Okay. Now, I didn't know who it was. It's okay that you don't know who it was because narrator Percy fills it in. I will have Dr. Moya McTeer fill it more in, but narrator Percy says that Procrustes was a giant who tried to kill Theseus with excessive hospitality on his way to Athens. So honestly felt kind of similar to the Lotus Casino in a way. But rather than fight, Percy tries to charm Krusty because he realizes this is a 7-foot-tall lizard man. I stand no chance against this giant monster.
Yeah.
So, going along with trying to charm him, Percy asks, what happens if people are too big? And Krusty grabs a double-bladed brass axe and says that he centers them just right and lops off whatever hangs over. And then narrator Percy, the whole exchange goes, I said, swallowing hard, sensible. Percy's fantastic. Percy is so good.
It somehow escalated even more.
Right?
Like,
gosh.
This just ratchets up so quickly.
So quickly. But then Percy, I love this move, asks about one of the beds. And he says, does this one really have this advertised feature of dynamic stabilizers to stop wave motion? And Krusty says, yes.
Why is that feature in a waterbed? Isn't the point the wave motion?
I don't know. It's one of those fads. A documentary about the rise and fall of waterbeds, I would watch so hard.
Absolutely.
That would be so good.
But like a waterbed with wave stabilization is just a mattress.
It's just an inconvenient mattress.
That's like an air mattress, basically.
Yeah. Notoriously good. Things universally beloved and always good for sleeping on, air mattresses. So he asks about this feature. Krusty says yes. Percy says, prove it. And Krusty gets on a bed. And then Percy snaps his fingers and says, ergo. The ropes fly out. Percy tells the ropes to center him. And I thought, no, what? Holy, yo.
I know. I was like, wait, does this actually happen?
He uncaps Riptide. Not only has he used the guy's thing against him, not only has he used the command of ergo, not only has he told them to center him, but Percy then says a few simple adjustments, and then he's getting ready to swing the dude's head off. And rather than beg for his life, you got to hand it to Krusty. Krusty starts trying to make offers where he's going to cut him a sweet deal on mattresses.
Always a salesman.
He died doing what he loved, trying to cut a deal.
For a waterbed.
Yeah. Percy swings away. Obviously, this dude has been murked, and he frees Grover and Annabeth, and Percy doesn't even stop at this, makes a joke to Annabeth. He goes, you look taller. These books are so funny.
They're funny.
So good.
Percy is a great example of a character who has just like undergone so much struggle and trauma that he has no choice just to be hilarious.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, he's like, oh, I found myself in another absolutely horrifying situation. Time to make a joke. And I love that character trope.
As someone that uses jokes and stuff like this as a coping mechanism, I very much appreciate it. And Kelly has pointed this out to me. Some people told me about this before I read the books, and I'm trying to see this non-biasedly. But a lot of people have told me, and Kelly, my wife, #1 Mike Schubert expert on earth. Maybe she would rival my parents, but given that we've never spent a second apart since March of 2020, she's a leading Mike Schubert expert at least. She says that there's many instances of Percy saying and doing stuff that I would do. And she's frustrated by it because she's so far ahead in the books now, but I inherently, by the nature of my job, cannot know. So she's just dog-earing all of these. But I think this was one of them where she just says that I love to make the kind of joke where when things are bad or hopeless, I always like to do a thing like, well, this looks great. And it's a very Mike Schubert vibe.
So you've been like particularly hilarious over the past 2 years.
Oh, just, super cool.
Cracking
super fun
jokes every which way.
I've been at my peak. Just thriving in the world, destroying itself. But I went through a terrible situation. What should we do? Make a joke. Annabeth replies, very funny, be faster next time, which is great. Percy then looks at Krusty's bulletin board and sees a DOA ad, and it has an address on it, and apparently it's a block away. And they're clearly just going to skedoodle on over. And that's the end of chapter 17, and that's the end of this episode of The Newest Olympian.
Woohoo!
Lauren, thank you so much for joining along, talking about Percy Jackson. You'll be back for the next episode where we will discuss chapter 18. But in the meantime, if people are thinking, wow, I loved that Lauren Shippen, and how could they not? Where can they find you doing stuff if they want to consume more Lauren Shippen content in the meantime?
Yeah, you can go to laurenshippen.com, and I'm at Lauren Shippen on Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, just it's easy to find.
Envious of how you were able to get those handles and website. That is impressive.
It's not a very common name. There's like one other person, I think, in America who's named Lauren Shippen.
Yeah, unfortunately, Michael, very, very common name.
Yeah.
And Schubert is like Smith in Germany. So,
right. Yes.
Not great. And also just, I think most people whose last name is Schubert get the nickname Shubes at some point in their life.
That makes sense.
So I
That makes
am
sense.
constantly fighting other Shubeses for the first one to get it on different platforms. There's only been a few where I get Shubes, but I did get it on PlayStation Network. So anytime
Nice.
I play online video games, I am just Shubes without a 17 or anything else. And that makes me very happy.
That's very good.
But Lauren, thank you so much for joining. Listeners, thank you for listening. And until next time, and as we see what other shenanigans are getting into now that they have just escaped waterbed-related death. Until then, I'll pursue you later.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor is Sherry Guo. The music is by Bettina Campamanes and Brandon Grugel, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you want to learn more about the show, such as what chapters we're covering in future episodes, you can go to thenewestolympian.com. If you want to support the show, you can go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. You'll get a bunch of bonus content for supporting us on Patreon. And if you want to find us on social media, we're at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And also, we are at reddit.com/r/the Newest Olympian. Speaking of that Patreon, I want to give a shout out to our producer level patrons: Lauda Bartova, Kelsey Gillespie, The Damn Steam Nuggets, Emma Cooey, Vicky Garcia, Ellie Hoskovchova, Veronica Bartova, Natanya Page, Haley Hastings, Robin Garcia, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Tough Bayfong, Moo Productions, Don't Call Me Nymphadora, Olivia Y, Craig McRoberts, Griffin Dork, Taylor Payne, Giselle Salvador, Minka Dreesen, Can't I See We Brain, Matt Barger, Peter Johnson the Twin, Sabrina Balsiger, Mooney B, Boney Pony, Harlan Christ, Heather McMillan, Casey Canales, Polly Burridge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Bridget Lowry, Aidan Lippold, Josh Sayer, Percy Blue, Josh Wilkie, Martin Anvik, Abby Ryan, Josh Clements, Angela MF, Mary Baumgartner, Shannon Yvonne Aguilar, Wise Girl, Alpacas Are Hope, Finn TZ, Ribbon Monstrosity, Samantha McNamara, Tate Sasson, Emil Oscar Thomason, Roxas 1912, and Rafaela. And if you want to help the show out in a non-monetary way, spreading it via word of mouth is huge. Telling someone about it directly, posting about it on social media, all these things really help. And I would appreciate it very much if you decide to do any of those things. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you tune into our next episode, which will also be with Lauren Shippen, but we will be covering chapter 18 of The Lightning Thief. But until then, I'll pursue you later. Hey, it's me, ASMR Mike. How's it going, everybody? So I am still here because I am currently working with my podcast provider to make sure that the end of episodes don't get cut off. I try to have some post-roll ads come in, but on certain apps, what'll happen is instead of putting those at the end, it will just splice off a minute of the outro, and then people don't get to hear things like the patron names and stuff like that. So I've been putting in some soothing noises, usually with my voice, but last episode it was elevator music and it seemed like people enjoyed that. I thought it was pretty funny and I'm glad you did as well. So I'm still here just to make sure that this error doesn't happen. The podcast provider that I use is actively working on trying to fix this, but I'm so much fun that I might stick around even if the issue gets resolved. But yeah, I just wanted to come in here to do my service, and also just, you know, I hope things are going well for you. I hope you're having a good day. Hope you're having a good week. I will say that on certain apps, what's going to happen is once I am complete, there are going to be some ads afterwards, and they might be less soothing than this. So just be prepared. The world is not perfect. I can't have this, which fixes a problem on one app, but then doesn't run into another problem on another app. There's no perfect solution, but I think this is a fun one, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and it's been a minute, so now I'm going to go.